Continuing our journey on The Rise, the Limit, we begin Chapter 17, A Fury Signifying Nothing Found. With the previous trip's travel karma seemingly exhausted, a new family expedition to Gifu Prefecture is immediately shaped by logistical hurdles and relentless rain. This is the story of how cancelled plans to see castles and cormorants led to an impromptu exploration of the region's complex military and aerospace history. A fury signifying nothing found. Rain turns grand plans to quiet museum halls where warplanes sleep in peace. Castle to cockpit, a costly course correction. Still recovering from my son's one-man assault on Kyoto's high-end sushi market, I decided our next move required the kind of efficiency only Japan's bullet train network can provide. At Kyoto Station, I pulled out my phone, ready to engage with the Shinkansen app, a marvel of modern convenience. The next train to Nagoya was in 15 minutes, which in this world of hyper-punctuality is practically a lifetime. I tapped in the order for 2 adults and 1 child, a transaction I've completed 1,000 times. But as my finger floated over the Assign IC card button, a horrible realization hit me. The kind that usually involves leaving the oven on or forgetting a birthday. In the eyes of Japan, my son was no longer a child. He had aged into a full-fare adult. My last-second save meant an unscheduled detour to a real human at a ticket window to correct my digital error. A 30-minute wallet-lightening ride later, we arrived in Nagoya. I have a history with Nagoya Station, and it's not a happy one. It holds the uncontested title of my least favorite Shinkansen station in the country, a place forged in the 9th circle of commuter hell. Our last visit on a weekend was a full-blown societal collapse compressed into a train terminal. Every luggage locker in the building was taken, forcing us to drag our bags through the human tsunami and out into the city streets. This bag haul was made all the more memorable by a rather serious internal conflict I was having with a bad piece of fish. But today was a Tuesday. The station was still a hive of activity, but the frantic, soul-crushing edge was gone. Out of morbid curiosity, I checked the lockers. 95% were empty, their little green lights glowing like beacons of hope. It was a potent lesson. Travel in Japan on a weekday, and you're a respected guest. Travel on a Saturday, and you're just another obstacle. From Nagoya, a smaller, humbler train carried us to Inuyama and our hotel, a place I'd booked based on a few slick photos and a prayer. For once, the online marketing didn't lie. The place was beautiful, a 5-star establishment that smelled of expensive wood polish and quiet discretion. It wasn't the Ritz-Carlton, but it was certainly priced like a distant, wealthier cousin. Lunch would run about $130 a person. Dinner, even more. My son, now officially a man in the eyes of the transit authority, cemented his new status by skipping the kids' meal and ordering the Wagyu beef. I just nodded and tried to do the currency conversion in my head. It was our first truly rainy day of the trip, a steady downpour that turned the world outside our window a soft, misty grey. High on a hill above us sat a castle, its silhouette barely visible through the clouds. That was on the agenda, but not before lunch. I ordered some lamb. It was good. Full, and with my bank account showing signs of distress, we took a taxi to the Gifu Air and Space Museum. It may not be as historic as the castle on the hill, but it contained a very specific, very personal treasure. The museum held 2 of my favorite things, beautifully combined into one object of mechanical perfection. I came for the history, I came for the culture, but most of all, I came for the flying boats. Swords and swallows, the skies of a storied sight. The taxi ride from our 5-star wallet-draining hotel was a quiet, damp affair. The rain that had stalked us all day was still coming down, and my son, fresh off a lunch of Wagyu beef that cost more than my first car, seemed content to stare out the window. High on the hill, the local castle loomed through the mist, a perfect picture of feudal Japan. We were, however, heading in the opposite direction, toward a place dedicated to a more modern and, frankly, louder form of combat. I'd come for the flying boats, those glorious, lumbering amphibious beasts that combine two of my favorite things. The Gifu Air and Space Museum, it turns out, had other plans for me. Kakamigahara isn't some random suburb they chose for Japan's largest aviation museum. This town has jet fuel in its soil. It was home to the country's second-ever airfield, laid out in 1917. Before long, big names like Mitsubishi and Kawasaki set up shop here to test their new toys. Kawasaki built a massive factory that during World War II became the beating heart of the Imperial Japanese Army's air power. This is where they churned out the Kai-61 fighter, the Heian, or Flying Swallow. Later, American B-29 spent a good deal of effort turning that same factory and its airfield into rubble. After the war, the Americans moved in, swept up the mess, and called it Camp Gifu, until handing it back in 1958. It's a complicated history, which may explain the museum's interesting collection policy. A few exhibits were donated by the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., a nice gesture that feels like the geopolitical equivalent of bringing a bottle of wine to a dinner party after you've previously bombed the host's house. Inside, the place is cavernous, filled with 43 aircraft that trace a line from sputtering biplanes to sleek jets. They have a replica of the Wright Flyer and a reproduction of the famous Zero fighter. But the main event is the real battle-scarred survivor, the only remaining Kawasaki Ki-61. Unlike the Zero, which was basically a flying firework designed with little thought for the man inside, the Heian was different. It was built around a German liquid-cooled engine, giving it a streamlined, almost European profile, and was designed to bring its pilot home. It was the sophisticated older brother to the Zero's scrappy disposable ideology. Of course, for every deadly serious war machine, there's a corner of the museum for the ideas that were, let's say, less successful. I was primarily there for the weird Japanese airplanes, and they did not disappoint. I found a full-scale wooden mock-up of an attack helicopter that looked less like a weapon of war and more like a piece of ambitious Amish cabinetry. Nearby was a pedal-powered airplane that a woman once successfully flew before, predictably crashing it. You have to admire the spirit of it all. The space section was equally strange and wonderful, featuring a samurai sword forged from a meteorite. This is not a metaphor. They took a chunk of iron from space and had a master smith turn it into a katana, creating an artifact that is equal parts ancient warrior culture and 70s heavy metal album cover. After marveling at an ion drive from an asteroid probe, my son and I decided to try the flight simulator. It was a two-person setup, and we managed to tie, which is a polite way of saying we were equally incompetent. The simulation was for a passenger plane, a detail that seemed to escape me. As I banked hard, trying to get a lock on a passing Airbus A380, a calm, synthesized voice informed me of my duties. I was apparently not supposed to be trying to shoot down the other airplanes. There is something fascinating about science. One gets such wholesale returns of conjecture out of such a trifling investment of fact. Mark Twain. Stellar sampling, Japan's precise planetary prowess. Having paid our respects to the weird and wonderful aircraft of Japan's past, it wasn't as though my son and I intended to ignore the Gifu Kakamigahara Air and Space Museum's other half. After all, having tried and failed to shoot down fellow pilots in a flight simulator, moving on to actual rocket science seemed like a logical step. The space section was where Japan's modern ambitions were on display, largely through the work of its national space agency, JAXA. JAXA gets astonishing results on a budget that would barely cover the coffee and donuts for a single NASA mission. It's an organization built on a philosophy of thrift and precision, proving you don't need a blank check to poke around the solar system. Their specialty seems to be pulling off missions that sound impossible on paper. Take the Hayabusa probe. In 2003, they launched it toward an asteroid named Itokawa. It successfully landed, scraped up some dust, and then began a 7-year drama-filled trip home that involved a series of technical breakdowns that would make a soap opera producer blush. It eventually limped back to Earth and dropped off its precious cargo. Not content to rest, JAXA launched Hayabusa 2 in 2014 to an asteroid named Ryugu. This time, landing and gathering a sample wasn't enough. Upon arrival, the controllers found Ryugu was less a solid rock and more a floating pile of gravel. To get at the good stuff, the pristine material under the surface, they came up with a plan that was part science and part Looney Tunes. They shot the asteroid. They fired a copper projectile into Ryugu to blast out a crater, then bravely flew the probe through the resulting debris cloud to snatch a sample. How do you even pitch that idea in a meeting? So, to get an uncontaminated sample from this 4.5 billion-year-old celestial object, we're going to bombard it with a piece of metal. It's the cosmic equivalent of performing surgery with a shotgun, yet it worked perfectly. As if pinpoint landings on flying rubble heaps weren't enough, their slim lander recently aced a lunar landing in January 2024, touching down within 55 meters of its target. That's like hitting a specific quarter on a football field from Los Angeles with a dart gun. Back on Earth, inside the museum, the evidence of this ingenuity was everywhere. They had a sleek ion drive, the kind of hyper-efficient engine that powered these long-haul missions. There were artifacts from the Hayabusa 2 probe, bits and pieces that had traveled millions of miles and back. Then I saw perhaps the greatest fusion of Japanese history and future ever conceived. A samurai sword forged from a meteorite. It's a solution for a problem no one has ever had, but you're glad someone solved it. It sat in its case, a testament to the idea that if you have the skill to fold steel and the ambition to catch falling stars, you might as well combine them. As Miyamoto Musashi wrote in The Book of Five Rings, the true science of martial arts means practicing them in such a way that they will be useful at any time, and to teach them in such a way that they will be useful in all things. It seems Japan's engineers took that to heart. Fractured frontiers, race, regiment, and relations at Camp Gifu. My son and I had just finished admiring a samurai sword forged from a meteorite at the Gifu Kakamigahara Air and Space Museum. It felt like the perfect summary of Japan, ancient tradition colliding with cosmic ambition. But the ground beneath the museum, beneath the gleaming JAXA ion drives and the model of the Mars rover, tells a different story. It's a story less about celestial bodies and more about the earthly drama of race, power, and the messy aftermath of war. It reminded me of Shakespeare's Othello, a celebrated general of a foreign army, whose identity and authority were constantly tested by the very people he served. Kakamigahara's own Othello story began in 1945. Before it was a museum, this land was Camp Gifu, and before that, it was a crucial hub for the Imperial Japanese Army, a place where they built and tested the famous Kawasaki Ki-61 Heian fighter. It was so important that American bombers made a point of visiting often, uninvited. After the war, the victorious Allies flipped the sign on the gate, and the former hornet's nest of Japanese aviation became a piece of American territory. The place didn't get really interesting, though, until 1947, when the U.S. Army's 24th Infantry Regiment arrived. The 24th was a segregated African-American unit, heirs to the legacy of the Buffalo Soldiers. Here was the first of many historical ironies. These men were members of a victorious occupying army, wielding authority over a defeated nation. They were the victors. At the same time, they were subjected to the same Jim Crow they'd left back home. They were denied senior command positions, held exclusively by white officers, and socialized in informally separate spaces. They were simultaneously the conqueror and the oppressed, a contradiction that would make a philosopher's head spin. They had the power to command the respect of Japanese civilians, but not the right to sit at the same table as their own white colleagues. This strange status shaped everything, especially their relationships with the local population. For many Japanese in Kakamigahara, these soldiers were their first direct encounter with black people, an encounter previously limited to racist caricatures in Japanese wartime propaganda. Now, they saw the US military itself enforcing segregation, which only seemed to confirm the propaganda. The American occupation's official censors, meanwhile, worked tirelessly to scrub any depiction of romance between American soldiers and Japanese women from the media, as if they could stop biology with a memo about public tranquility. It was a fool's errand. From these relationships came thousands of children, given the cold clinical label konketsuji, or mixed blood child. They were often called occupation babies, born into a world that had a place for neither of their parents together, and certainly not for them. They were ghosts of a history nobody wanted to claim. One of these children, a woman named Eiko Ishikura, spent decades searching for the father she never knew after a lifetime of looking, DNA testing. Finally connected her to her American family long after her father had passed away. Her story is a kind of modern myth, a difficult, lifelong search for a beginning. It's a Sisyphean task, pushing the stone of identity up a hill for years, all for a connection that arrives just a moment too late. Stone Sentinel, a story of survival and stewardship. The mind has a strange way of holding on to the residue of a place. Leaving the Air and Space Museum, with its ghosts of American GIs and the complex racial currents of Camp Gifu, felt like surfacing for air. We had spent the morning immersed in the calculated machinery of 20th century conflict, and now we were driving toward a more personal, hands-on version of history, one built of wood and stone on a hill overlooking the Kyoto River. Inuyama Castle doesn't just sit on its hill, it commands it. From a distance, it looks exactly like what you'd want a 500-year-old Japanese castle to look like, imposing, elegant, and stubbornly vertical. It has the oldest original wooden keep in the country, a fact that sounds impressive on paper but translates to a deeply personal conversation with your quadriceps. The stairs inside are less a method of ascent and more a series of polite suggestions on where to place your foot next, each one polished smooth by centuries of shuffling feet and, presumably, the occasional panicked samurai. This is the castle that the three great unifiers of Japan all fought over. Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu, the holy trinity of Japanese warlords, all wanted this valuable piece of real estate. They threw armies at it, schemed for it, and bled for it. Which makes its more recent history all the more hilarious. The great paradox of Inuyama Castle is that this priceless national treasure was, for a time, considered a worthless lemon. After the Meiji government took control of all feudal properties in the late 19th century, a massive earthquake in 1891 nearly knocked the castle down. The government, faced with a colossal repair bill, did what any sensible bureaucracy would do. It found a way to make it someone else's problem. In 1895, they gave the castle back to the original daimyo family, the Naruse clan, on the condition that they pay for all repairs and upkeep. It was a brilliant, historic act of passing the buck. For the next century, Inuyama became the only privately owned castle in Japan, essentially the world's most magnificent fixer-upper. The Narus family, bless their hearts, actually fixed it, holding on to their ancestral home until finally transferring it to a public foundation in 2004. From the top floor, a veranda offers a dizzying view of the river, a silver snake winding through the plains of Owari and Mino. You can see why Nobunaga wanted it. You can also see why the Meiji bean counters didn't. After descending back into the 21st century, we walked to the Urakuen Garden at the foot of the hill. It's home to the Joan Tea House, a national treasure in its own right, designed by Oda Urakusai. He was the younger brother of the fearsome warlord Nobunaga, and while his brother was busy conquering Japan, Urakusai was mastering the tea ceremony. He somehow managed to survive the slaughterhouse of Sengoku period politics, a feat far more impressive than taking a castle. He found a different kind of power, one centered on quiet contemplation in a small, meticulously designed room. The tea house itself was moved here from Kyoto in 1972, a fragile piece of tranquility that has outlasted generations of warriors. As the old book on the subject says, teaism is a cult founded on the adoration of the beautiful among the sordid facts of everyday existence. Fishing foiled, fiery fowl forsaken for family fare. Having thoroughly inspected Japan's only privately owned castle, we were ready for the evening's main event. At the foot of Inuyama on the Kiso River, a tradition over 1,300 years old was supposed to unfold. But as we stepped out, the sky decided our cultural enrichment could wait. The cormorant fishing was cancelled due to rain. A millennium of history outmaneuvered by drizzle. We were supposed to be on a boat, watching a master fisherman or Usho command a dozen cormorants on leashes. It's a job description that sounds like it was invented during a fever dream. The whole operation is illuminated by a blazing fire basket hanging off the boat's prow, lighting up the water to attract the local ayu fish. This is where the genius and sheer weirdness of the system kicks in. Each bird wears a small snare around its neck, a carefully calibrated necktie that prevents it from swallowing any fish of significant value. The small ones go down, a sort of avian performance bonus, but the big ones get stuck. The master then pulls the bird back, holds it upside down, and efficiently squeezes the fish out of its throat. It's a spectacle of organized regurgitation. This isn't some backwater fishing trick. It gets a shout-out in the Kojiki, Japan's oldest book, which is like finding a detailed review of a monster truck rally in the Book of Genesis. The practice was so esteemed that the warlord Oda Nobunaga put it under his personal protection to entertain guests, which must have been a nice change of pace from all the castle-sieging Tokugawa Ieyasu. The man who finally unified Japan was also a fan, having the day's ayu catch delivered to his castle in Tokyo. Gifu's cormorant fishing is so prestigious it carries the official patronage of the Imperial Household Agency, making these fishermen imperial employees. Even Charlie Chaplin came twice, presumably to see if the little tramp could learn a thing or two from a bird that couldn't swallow its dinner. All that history, all those imperial fishermen and fire-lit boats were happening without us. Our grand cultural evening consisted of walking around the castle grounds in a light mist, failing to secure consolation ice cream, and heading back to the hotel. We settled in for another great, if wallet-lightening meal. This was the dinner where my son ordered the wagyu, a slab of beef that probably cost more than one of the emperor's cormorants. I had salmon. After some special desserts, we called it a night, ready to move on. The 1,300-year-old tradition had been replaced by a meal that was, in its own way, just as memorable and far easier to digest. And that brings us to the close of Chapter 17, A Fury Signifying Nothing Found, where rained-out plans in Gifu revealed a quieter history of industrial evolution and familial stewardship. Next time, a sequence of travel blunders on the way to Takayama leads to a spiritual rite in a Buddhist temple and the modern-day quest for a working ATM. If you enjoyed this journey, the complete travelogue, Shinkansen and Sensibility, is available now as a Kindle book on Amazon, and you can join my community on Patreon for bonus content, where wrong trains find their terminus. Wrong trains carry souls, through mist to sacred darkness. Past meets ATM. Wrong rails, repeated rushes for a rainy route. My visit to the Nintendo Museum, an experience I can only describe as karmic bankruptcy court, proved to be an accurate prophecy. The universe, having patiently waited for me to exhaust my allotment of good fortune, was now ready to collect with the swift, humorless efficiency of a tax audit. Our lodging for the night was, to put it mildly, an adventure in itself, but to grasp how we ended up there, you must first appreciate the day's escalating parade of small indignities. It began, as most modern tragedies do, with breakfast, specifically a $100 breakfast. This was not some decadent affair with gold leaf pancakes and a cellist playing mournful ballads about my bank account. This is just what two people eating eggs costs now, a new and unforgiving law of physics. My plan for the morning was a simple walk to a celebrated tea garden Google Maps, a service that can pinpoint a specific manhole cover in rural Nebraska and probably knows my social security number, had apparently decided the garden's Wednesday closure was classified information. I discovered this 2 minutes after leaving the hotel by pressing my face against its very locked, very indifferent gate. After checking out, we took a taxi to the station. Our train, we were informed, was delayed. Heavy rains had washed logs onto the single track that snakes through the mountains, a rugged forested pass that looked like a close cousin of the Great Smoky Mountains. This meant all trains were now engaged in a polite game of take your turn, a process conducted with all the urgency of a tortoise-on-tortoise chess match. We waited. Then a train glided to a stop at our platform. We rushed aboard, luggage clattering, a brief, hot flare of victory in our chests. It died quickly. A sinking feeling began to set in, the kind you get when you realize you've hit reply all on a very personal email. My wife, ever the pragmatist, found a conductor. He confirmed we were in fact on the wrong train. We needed track 3. In a mad dash that would have shamed an Olympian, we hauled our luggage up a flight of stairs, across a cavernous overpass, and down the other side, a train sat waiting at track 4. Convinced that all trains were now operating on a purely theoretical schedule, we leaped on, breathless. This felt right. This felt like a correction. And then, as if summoned by our hubris, the correct train on track 3 pulled in, paused just long enough for us to register its taunting existence, and rolled away. We were on the wrong train. Again. Twice in 10 minutes. It's a personal record I have no ambition to break. All I truly wanted at that moment was to execute a single, simple, travel-related task with the competence of a reasonably intelligent houseplant. Defeated, we slunk back to the JR station agent to confess our sins. He listened with the serene patience of a bomb disposal expert examining a very stupid, very sweaty bomb. Then he informed us that our Pasmo transit cards would not have worked on that private line anyway. Our spectacular double failure had accidentally saved us from being fined for unauthorized travel. We had failed our way to success. We bought new, painfully expensive paper tickets and finally boarded the right train, our third of the day. As we pulled away from the station, the mountains of the Hida River Valley rose up to meet us. The fog and rain had wrapped the peaks in a soft grey light, a quiet, mournful beauty that can only be truly appreciated after a morning spent running between platforms like Sisyphus with a roller bag. How is it that the reward for such profound incompetence can be a view this perfect? the mountain town that time forgot and bureaucrats remembered. My brain felt like a scrambled egg that had been dropped on a train platform, twice. After a series of transportation mishaps that felt less like a simple travel delay and more like a cosmic prank, rolling into Takayama felt like a victory snatched from the jaws of incompetence, mostly my own. The town, tucked away in the Hida Mountains, immediately gives off the impression that it missed the memo on the last 4 centuries of progress. The air smells of cedar and old money, and the dark wood buildings lean into each other like old gossips. This place owes its shockingly preserved state to a classic power move. In the late 1600s, the shogun in Tokyo, realizing the region was sitting on a gold mine of timber and minerals, put the town under his direct control. This effectively fired the local samurai, but it also funneled a fortune into the area. The local merchants, now rich but blocked from any real political power, did what any ambitious person with too much money and time does. They got into competitive home decorating. They poured their wealth into their townhouses, engaging in a quiet, vicious war fought with latticework. The intricacy of the wooden screens on your house became the 17th century equivalent of having a slightly greener lawn than your neighbor. They couldn't build castles, so they competed with craftsmanship. Now, you might think obsessive woodworking is a strange local hobby, but it's practically in their DNA. Centuries earlier, during the Nara period, the mountainous province of Hida had a problem. It couldn't grow enough rice to pay its imperial taxes, so they negotiated a different kind of payment. Every year they sent 10 of their best carpenters to the capital to build temples and palaces. This is the historical equivalent of offering to retile the IRS's bathroom to settle your tax bill. These master artisans, the Hida no Takumi, became so legendary that their skills are still on display in the town's massive festival floats and in the joinery of the old buildings, all assembled with the geometric precision of a puzzle box and not a single nail. You can admire the handiwork of man all you want, but it's all sitting on a foundation laid by a far more chaotic force. The Hida Mountains are, geologically speaking, rowdy newcomers. At less than 5 million years old, they are some of the youngest mountains on Earth, having burst upwards in a fit of tectonic squeezing. This violent uplift is what walled Takayama off from the rest of the world for so long, allowing its unique culture to pickle in isolation. It also happens to be the reason for the region's best gimmick, the hot springs. The same volcanic forces that could send everyone running for their lives are responsible for the area's main source of relaxation. It's a strange bargain with nature, offering you a lovely hot bath with one hand while holding a fistful of lava behind its back with the other. As a piece of trivia, the mineral deposits left by the geothermal activity on Mount Yakadake are so prized that they are commercially harvested, refined into a powder called unohana, and sold to people who wish to replicate the Okuhida onsen experience in their own bathtubs at home. But the geology here has one more secret, and it's a good one. The bedrock beneath Takayama is a type of gneiss, an ancient, incredibly stable rock that started as mud on the seafloor hundreds of millions of years ago. Because it's one of the most solid chunks of crust in all of Japan, scientists have chosen it for a truly bizarre project. They are carving a colossal cavern inside a nearby mountain to house a detector called the Hyper Kamiokande. They plan to fill this giant man-made cave with 260,000 tons of ultra-pure water, all to catch a few invisible particles called neutrinos zipping through the Earth from distant exploding stars. The very rock that sealed this town off from the world for centuries is now being used as a window to look into the farthest reaches of the cosmos. After a day defined by wrong trains and historical cul-de-sacs, what other secrets was this mountain town hiding? Healing heat. The communal culture of Japan's cauldrons. Japan's onsen, or hot springs, represent far more than just a relaxing soak. These geothermal pools serve as cultural institutions where centuries of tradition meet the country's volcanic geology in a uniquely Japanese way. To earn the official designation of onsen, water must be naturally heated to at least 25 degrees Celsius, 77 degrees Fahrenheit, at its source, and contain at least one of 19 specific minerals. This isn't just bureaucratic nitpicking. It's a quality control system that separates authentic mineral springs from ordinary heated baths. The practice runs deep in Japanese history. References to onsen bathing appear in the Nihon Shoki, one of Japan's oldest historical texts from the 8th century. For generations, samurai soaked their battle wounds in these mineral-rich waters, monks used them for purification rituals, and farmers found relief from back-breaking agricultural work. This wasn't about getting clean. That happens before you enter the water. Instead, onsen bathing became a form of communal healing and social bonding. The cultural concept of hadaka no tsukiai, literally naked communion, captures something essential about onsen culture. When everyone strips down to their birthday suit, status symbols disappear along with the clothing. The CEO and the construction worker become equals in the steaming water, fostering a form of honest communication that's harder to achieve when everyone's dressed to impress. The Okuhida hot spring village near Takayama showcases how geography shapes onsen culture. This collection of 5 hot spring towns owes its existence to the volcanic activity of nearby Mount Yakadake. Each location offers waters with distinct mineral profiles and supposed health benefits. Shin Hotaka Onsen features sulfur springs, traditionally believed to help with skin conditions and arthritis. Fukuji and Shin Hirayu Onsen offer sodium bicarbonate springs, nicknamed Bijin no Yu, or Waters of the Beautiful, for their supposed skin-softening properties. Tokyo Onsen provides simple thermal springs with lower mineral concentrations, valued for general stress relief and muscle relaxation. Hirayu Onsen, the oldest of the 5, offers a complex blend of sodium, calcium, and magnesium bicarbonate waters. Local legend claims the spring was rediscovered after an earthquake when villagers spotted a white egret, believed to be a manifestation of Yakushi Nyorai, the Buddha of healing, treating its wounded leg in the steaming water. Japan's onsen culture has produced some unlikely celebrities. In Nagano Prefecture, Japanese macaques have learned to use human-built hot springs to stay warm during harsh winters. These snow monkeys of Jigokudani have become international tourism stars, proving that the appeal of a hot soak transcends species barriers. Gero Onsen in Gifu Prefecture earned designation as one of Japan's 3 famous springs from the 17th century Confucian scholar Hayashi Razan. The town also features a gasho village displaying original gasho zukuri farmhouses relocated from Shirakawa-go, saved from submersion by dam construction. The mineral-rich water here is exceptionally smooth, earning it the nickname Water of the Beauties. Navigating onsen etiquette requires understanding that these aren't swimming pools or social clubs. The rules exist to maintain the purity and tranquility that make onsen special. Swimsuits are forbidden. You must completely undress in the changing room before entering the bathing area. The most critical rule involves washing thoroughly with soap at shower stations before entering the main bath. This isn't optional politeness. It's mandatory hygiene. The small towel you bring serves as a modesty cover while walking to the bath, but it must never touch the water. Most bathers fold it and place it on their head or leave it on nearby rocks. Inside the bath, quiet contemplation is the goal. This isn't the place for swimming laps or loud conversation. Before returning to the changing room, pat yourself dry to avoid dripping water on the floors. Tattoos present a particular challenge. Many onsen maintain no tattoos policies due to historical associations with organized crime. While attitudes are slowly changing, especially in tourist areas, many establishments still enforce these restrictions. Private onsen rentals, Kashikiri Bureau, offer alternatives for tattooed visitors or those preferring privacy. The onsen experience reflects Japan's broader relationship with nature, a recognition that the same geological forces capable of destruction also provide healing and relaxation. The mineral deposits from Mount Yakidake's geothermal activity are commercially harvested and refined into unohana powder, allowing people to recreate the onsen experience in their home bathtubs. It's a reminder that Japan's volcanic landscape offers both risk and reward, often in the same steaming package. Finding the light at the end of the tunnel, literally. After the train fiasco, which felt like a slapstick routine staged by Japan Railways, we finally dragged ourselves into our lodgings in Takayama. We were staying at a Buddhist temple, a choice driven by two factors. The first was our ongoing quest for unique experiences. The second, and far more urgent, was our desperate need for a washing machine. Doing laundry for 2 outfits for 3 people at the Kyoto, Hilton had set us back nearly $100, a price that makes you question if it would be cheaper to just buy new clothes and light the old ones on fire. The temple's marketing materials are very clear on one point. We are not a hotel. This is a fine sentiment, but they do have rooms, accept money, and, most importantly, possess the sacred Maytag of our salvation. The room was perfectly traditional, with tatami mats smelling faintly of dried grass, and our 3 futons laid out on the floor. My son, a connoisseur of modern comforts, immediately declared an ancient rattan a high-tech gaming chair. A serene garden wrapped around the building, though in my professional opinion its tranquility quotient could be improved by about 300% with a few koi. We were also briefly led into the prayer hall for a lecture. It was a very short lecture. I saw other guests getting much longer ones, which led me to believe we had been spiritually profiled and found wanting. The temple's main attraction, apart from its laundry facilities, is the Kaidan Meguri. This is a chance to descend a staircase under the main altar into a corridor of complete sight-robbing darkness. The idea is to navigate this subterranean tunnel with one hand on the wall, a symbolic journey of death and rebirth. Down in the oppressive blackness, you feel around for a metal lock, the key to paradise. Touching it is said to cleanse your sins and book you a spot in the Pure Land. It's a profound exercise in sensory deprivation, a sort of spiritual escape room where the prize is eternal salvation instead of a group photo. Of course, the power of this experience is borrowed. This temple is an official branch of the Great Zenkoji in Nagano, one of the most important pilgrimage sites in Japan. Zenkoji's claim to fame is that it holds the first Buddha statue ever brought to the country. According to legend, it arrived from Korea in 552 AD and immediately started a fight at the imperial court. The pro-Buddhist Soga clan wanted to keep it. The traditionalist Mononobe clan did not. At one point during a plague, the anti-Buddhist faction blamed the foreign deity and tossed the statue into a canal, which seems a bit harsh. It was later fished out and eventually enshrined in Nagano. What makes the statue so revered is that nobody has ever seen it. It's a hibutsu, a secret Buddha, so holy it's kept permanently hidden even from the temple's chief priest. This is brilliant marketing. The mystery amplifies its power. Once every 7 years, a full-sized replica is shown to the public, and millions of people show up for a glimpse. Being at a branch temple with its own secret tunnel feels like getting access to the authorized, spiritually licensed version of this mystery. Back in our room, the washing machine whirred away, churning our worldly grime. My son was locked into his game, his face illuminated by the glow of a screen full of digital combat. The sacred and the mundane weren't just coexisting here, they were roommates. We had come for enlightenment, but on our own terms. My main concern wasn't finding a key to paradise in a dark basement, but whether I'd remembered to put fabric softener in with the towels. Just how much karma does a clean load of laundry get you? Secular Sutras. Reconfiguring religion for a rational world. Our stay at the Takayama Zenkoji was proving to be an education, though not in the way their pamphlets intended. I found myself sitting on the tatami mat, listening to the deeply satisfying hum of a washing machine finally doing its job. In his book, The Selfish Gene, Richard Dawkins notes that we need a name for the new replicator, a noun that conveys the idea of a unit of cultural transmission or a unit of imitation. Mimeme comes from a suitable Greek root. But I want a monosyllable that sounds a bit like gene. I hope my classicist friends will forgive me if I abbreviate mimeme to meme. I doubt he was thinking about Japanese funerary rites at the time, but the shoe fits perfectly. Religions, it seems, are just collections of very sticky ideas. Buddhism is a masterclass in this. It's a memoplex, a whole solar system of concepts that have been mutating and competing for survival for centuries. Take the figure of Jizo, the guardian of deceased children's souls. The traditional story is heartbreakingly specific. These children are trapped in limbo on the banks of the Sanzu River, the river of three crossings, where they must endlessly pile stones into towers to atone for the grief they caused their parents. Every night, demons knock over the towers. Jizo is the one who protects them from this torment. It's a powerful, gut-wrenching idea. But asking a modern Tokyoite if they literally believe in this is like asking a New Yorker if they expect to meet a three-headed dog on the subway to Queens. The old hag who supposedly guards the river, Datsueba, has been demoted from a terrifying gatekeeper to a piece of folklore, a character from a story you tell but don't necessarily believe. And yet, the little statues of Jizo with their red bibs are everywhere. The belief fades, but the comfort remains. This is the great paradox of a successful faith. To survive, it must be willing to let parts of itself die. The core brand tenets, like karma, are big winners. Karma is a brilliantly simple concept, a cosmic law of cause and effect. But as it traveled, it got tangled up with local superstitions, morphing into a sort of spiritual accounting system for good and bad luck. I couldn't help but think of our travel karma after missing 2 trains in a row the day before. Was that a consequence of some past misdeed, or just the result of not being able to read Japanese platform signs? The line gets blurry. Rebirth, too, has undergone a serious rebranding for the Western market. The old-school version, a grand cycle of lifetimes, is a tough sell for people raised on a one-and-done worldview. So it's been repackaged as a psychological event, a rebirth that happens moment to moment. It's less about coming back as a sea cucumber and more about feeling refreshed after a weekend mindfulness retreat. And that's the most successful mutation of all: mindfulness. It's a concept that's been surgically removed from its religious body, sanitized and sold as a secular cure-all for stress. It's the ultimate Trojan horse, a virus of the mind that spreads not because of doctrine, but because it works just enough to make you tell your friends about it. The historian David L. McMahon calls this evolution Buddhist modernism, a 2-century dialogue with science and psychology. It's an approach that favors meditation and personal experience over mythological figures and rituals, making it more palatable to a world that wants its spirituality to come with a side of scientific approval. It's the difference between the stark, unnerving faith of the Kaiden Maguri tunnel and an app that reminds you to breathe. Now, you might say this sounds awfully cynical. as if a profound spiritual path is nothing more than a product being adapted for new markets. But I don't see it that way. This ability to change, to let the non-essential parts fall away while strengthening the core, isn't a weakness. It's the entire point. It's what separates a living tradition from a museum piece. It's how an ancient faith manages to stick around long enough to find itself in a temple with free Wi-Fi and a desperately needed washing machine. The Hidden God Enclave. More of Japan's mysterious statues. My recent deep dive into Buddhist memetics left me thinking about how religions adapt to survive. Some ideas fade, like the old hag at the river to the afterlife, while others, like mindfulness, get unbundled from the faith and repackaged for corporate wellness retreats. But I hadn't considered the opposite strategy, making a belief stronger by hiding it entirely. After my stay at the Takayama Zenkoji, a branch of the main temple in Nagano, I learned its most famous icon, the first Buddha statue ever brought to Japan, is a Hibutsu, a secret Buddha. It's so sacred no one is allowed to see it ever. This is a brilliant paradox. In an age of endless exposure, the most powerful religious marketing tool in Japan is a locked box. It's a surprisingly common practice. In Kyoto, the famous Kiyomizu-dera temple, which juts out from a mountainside on a massive wooden deck, has its own secret inside is a statue of the Senju Kannon, the bodhisattva of compassion, who is said to have 1,000 arms, presumably to make her the undisputed champion of juggling, hugging, and saving everyone simultaneously. This particular canon is so exclusive that the temple doors are opened for a public viewing only once every 33 years. The number is deliberate. It matches the 33 forms the canon can take to help people. For a devotee, this isn't just a pilgrimage, it's a once-in-a-generation event, the spiritual equivalent of seeing Halley's Comet, but with better odds of improving your karma. If a 33-year wait sounds extreme, travel to Nara, where the Horyuji temple complex contains some of the oldest wooden buildings on Earth. In its Hall of Dreams sits the Yumechigai Cannon, the dream-changing cannon, a statue with the highly specific power of turning your bad dreams into good ones. For centuries, it was kept completely wrapped in cloth, hidden away like a piece of cursed treasure in a pirate movie. The priests warned that to look upon it would invite disaster naturally. Someone had to look. In the 1880s, the American art historian Ernest Fenollosa, a man clearly unburdened by superstition, convinced the reluctant priests to let him peek. After much debate, they unwrapped it. There was no earthquake. No flash of lightning. The only disaster was for the centuries of dust mites suddenly rendered homeless. The statue, a stunning 7th-century sculpture, was almost perfectly preserved. Today, you can see it, but only for a few weeks each spring and autumn, offering a brief window for believers to get their subconscious minds straightened out. These aren't isolated cases of divine shyness. Todaiji, also in Nara, is famous for its giant bronze Buddha that sits out in the open, ready for its close-up. But another hall there protects a statue of the fierce guardian Shukongoshin, who is unveiled for exactly 1 day a year. You have to wonder what goes into that decision. Is there a committee meeting? Does the second Tuesday in August work for you, fierce guardian deity? It seems the surest way to guarantee reverence is to create scarcity. A god on permanent display is just part of the architecture. A god you might miss for another 33 years is an appointment you don't want to be late for. I began checking calendars. The next viewing for the Kiyomizu-dera Cannon is in 2033. I made a mental note. It was a long shot, but maybe my travel karma would hold out. The Boston Brahmin who became Japan's art messiah. My recent education on Hibutsu, Japan's tradition of keeping sacred statues under lock and key, naturally led to a follow-up question. if a statue like the Umechigai cannon was kept wrapped up for centuries? Who was the first person to finally peak? The answer serves up one of history's better jokes. The man who saved traditional Japanese art was not a samurai warrior or a high priest, but a tweed-clad American philosopher from Salem, Massachusetts. Ernest Fenollosa arrived in Japan in 1878 to teach political economy, a subject about as artistically inspiring as a tax return. He landed during the Meiji Restoration, when Japan was in a full-blown sprint to catch up with the West. The government's motto was Bunmei Kaika, or Civilization and Enlightenment, which in practice meant a national spring cleaning where all the priceless, centuries-old family heirlooms were being dragged to the curb to make room for factories and bowler hats. Buddhist temples were being torn down, masterpieces were sold for pocket change, and traditional painting was getting elbowed aside by Western Oil's Fenollosa, the outsider, looked at this fire sale and was horrified. He saw pure genius where the local elites now only saw embarrassing feudal clutter. His most famous moment of intervention came at Horyuji Temple in Nara. He'd heard whispers of a legendary statue, the Umechigai cannon, sealed away and wrapped in cloth for centuries. The priests were having none of it. They insisted it was too holy to be seen and that laying eyes on it would trigger some sort of divine smiting Fenollosa, armed with a cocktail of official government backing and pure stubbornness, talked them into it. As they unwound the bindings, the ancient cotton disintegrated into dust, revealing a gleaming, perfectly preserved 7th-century statue. The priests, presumably checking the sky for lightning bolts, saw a miracle. Fenollosa saw proof he was on the right track. He didn't do it alone. He found a protégé in Okakura Kakuzo, a brilliant young critic who would later write the classic The Book of Tea. Together they were a cultural buddy cop duo fighting to save Japan from itself. They lobbied the government relentlessly, convincing it to pass Japan's first laws to protect antiquities in 1897. They traveled the country, cataloguing Japan's art and essentially inventing the modern concept of a national treasure. Fenollosa also put his money where his mouth was, becoming one of the world's biggest collectors of Japanese art, especially ukiyo-e woodblock prints. He bought them by the crate load. In a final twist of irony, this vast collection was later acquired by the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. This is why one of the greatest repositories of quintessentially Japanese art is not in Tokyo or Kyoto, but in New England. He eventually converted to Buddhism, taking the name Teishin. He came to Japan to teach the flow of money, but stayed to preserve the flow of art. He arrived as a curious foreigner, but died an honored friend whose ashes were returned to be buried at a temple overlooking Lake Biwa. The A-list of artifacts, how Japan curates its history. Considering Ernest Fenollosa's story, the man who practically wrestled a hidden god out of a dusty temple closet to save it. You'd think the business of protecting Japanese art would be a field for adventurers and romantics. That was then. The passionate crusade he and Okakura Kakuzo started has since evolved, or perhaps calcified, into something they might not recognize, a legal machine. The spirit of their mission survives, but it now wears a suit, carries a briefcase, and speaks in subsections. What was once about dramatic unveilings is now about due process. The system is a two-tiered pyramid of prestige, and getting to the top is harder than climbing Fuji in flip-flops. First, an object must be designated an important cultural property. This is Japan's artistic major leagues, a roster of over 13,000 paintings, swords, and ancient documents. From this already exclusive club, a special counsel at the Agency for Cultural Affairs, a group I picture working in a silent, windowless room, promotes the absolute best to national treasure. This is the all-star team with just over 1,100 members. It's less a friendly promotion and more like a Supreme Court ruling on historical importance. The whole thing operates with the solemnity of a space launch and the speed of a tectonic plate. The standard for promotion isn't just about craftsmanship or age. An artifact could be forged from a fallen star by a master swordsmith with 3 arms, but if it isn't a cornerstone of the national story, it has no shot. This is the velvet rope. Trying to get an item designated a national treasure based on beauty alone is like trying to join a yacht club by showing the board a picture of your really nice canoe. They'll nod politely before pointing you to the door. It has to be Himeji Castle, not just a very well-built shed. Achieving this status comes with what can only be described as golden handcuffs. The owner gets immense bragging rights and government funds for upkeep, but they essentially hand the keys over to the nation. The object can't be sold, altered, or even moved to another room without a permission slip from Tokyo. Its export is forbidden, turning it into a beautiful state-sponsored prisoner. It is Fenolosa's original vision fulfilled by government mandate, a guarantee that a treasure will be preserved for the nation, but also a guarantee that it will never again be found. The Shogun's mountain office, where power was measured in rice. A walk through Takayama is a walk through a forest of ghosts. Not the spooky kind, but the ghosts of trees. The whole town smells of cedar, and the dark-stained latticework of the old merchant houses announces that you are in a place where wood is not just a building material, but the entire point. The region is so famous for its artisans that for centuries the local province paid its taxes to the central government, not in rice, but in people. Every year they sent 10 master woodworkers to the capital, which seems like a raw deal for the carpenters, but a fantastic arrangement for anyone in Kyoto who needed a new bookshelf. This legacy of woodworking created a town so valuable that in 1692, the shogun decided it was too important to be left to the locals. So he took it. The administrative building from which he ran his new acquisition, the Takayama Jinya, was our destination. Having just spent the morning battling a train system as complex and unforgiving as Japan's legal framework for identifying national treasures, I was in the right mindset to appreciate a building dedicated to absolute bureaucratic control. The Jinya is not a castle built for war, but something far more rare. The only surviving regional government office from the Edo period. It's the feudal equivalent of a perfectly preserved DMV, if your DMV also had an execution ground and was in charge of the entire regional economy. Before the shogunate's hostile takeover, this spot was home to the local lord's villa. But the government in Edo, now Tokyo, saw the vast forests of priceless Hida cypress and essentially told the Kanamori clan their lease was UP. The shogun installed his own men, and the Jinya became the nerve center for the entire province. Every tax, every decree, and every judgment for 600 surrounding villages came from this one spot, all under the shogun's official triple hollyhock logo. After our own recent fiasco involving several wrong trains and a frantic platform dash that nearly sent us to another prefecture, I could appreciate the efficiency of such top-down management. Although the imposing gates were closed for the day, it was easy to get a sense of the place. Inside those walls were the elegant tatami offices for the samurai bureaucrats, but the real engine of the Jinya was in the back. The massive storehouses in feudal Japan, rice wasn't just lunch, it was money. The entire tax system was basically a grain collection scheme, and these storehouses, the largest and oldest in the country, were the provincial treasury. This was Fort Knox, but for carbohydrates. The building's primary job was to suck rice out of the countryside and keep it safe for the government. Imagining a tour, you'd walk through the whole operation. You'd see the reception rooms for visiting dignitaries and the kitchens that fed the staff. Then you'd find the interrogation room, a place that starkly reminds you that while the jinya collected rice, it also dispensed justice. Some of it fair, some of it probably less so. The building is a complete instruction manual on how to run a feudal society, a story of power, resources, and social order, preserved not as a ruin, but as a locked and silent building that still looks like it means business. A nearby shopkeeper began pulling a wooden shutter across his storefront, the rattle echoing down the quiet street. The sound marked the day's end. Even with its gates shut, the jinya's blank walls and heavy tiled roofs projected a quiet authority. It was a silent, powerful reminder that long before our confusing train tickets and overpriced sushi, this town ran on a different currency. Magnificent trees, and the men skilled enough to shape them. Fine fat. The filigree of famed Hida beef. Takayama's reputation was built by men who could turn a block of cypress into a work of art with nothing but a sharp blade and an unnerving amount of patience. We'd learned that their legacy, the anointing of the Hida no Takumi as master craftsman, was earned by paying their taxes in skill instead of rice. It seems the region never lost its knack for producing luxury goods that the government would rather have than cash. They just switched from wood to beef. Standing on a street corner, my stomach rumbling a protest against a day of sightseeing, I decided to sample this modern form of tribute. I bought a few skewers of famous Hida beef from a street vendor, imagining it would be a respectable appetizer. It was not. It was a magnificent 3 bites of meat on a stick. It was delicious, certainly. But it was the kind of delicious that makes you angry there isn't more of it. I had to understand what alchemy justified this price-to-portion ratio. The answer begins not with a wizard, but with a bull, a specific one named Yasufuku, who was brought to Gifu Prefecture in 1981. Yasufuku was less a cow and more a genetic miracle, the Abraham of a chosen people whose only commandment was to be mouth-wateringly tender. A huge portion of all certified Hida beef today descends directly from him, making him the undisputed bovine patriarch of the industry. He was to his kind what Prometheus was to ours, except instead of bringing fire, he brought intramuscular fat with a low melting point. To carry on Yasufuku's hallowed name, a cow must live a life of audited purity. It has to be a purebred Japanese black, raised in Gifu for at least 14 months, and then subjected to a final judgment by the Japan Meat Grading Association. This is where it gets complicated. The beef is graded on a scale that makes applying to an Ivy League college look straightforward, with the pinnacle being a 5. This signifies a perfect storm of yield and quality, with a marbling score so high it means the fat has basically achieved a hostile takeover of the muscle. To get a cow to this pinnacle of achievement, you might imagine the farmers follow the old myths about beer benders and deep tissue massages. The reality is more like a wellness retreat. The cattle are raised in the mountains, drink clean water, and enjoy a low-stress lifestyle. The massages are just vigorous brushing sessions to keep them happy and improve circulation, because a calm cow is a tasty cow. It's the same meticulous, obsessive dedication that the old carpenters applied to a temple beam, just redirected toward a future stake. This single-minded pursuit of perfection is all over Takayama. You see it in dishes like hoba miso, where beef and vegetables are grilled on a fragrant magnolia leaf, or in the modern street food of seared beef nigiri served on a rice cracker. Like the myth of Pygmalion, who carved a statue so perfect he fell in love with it, the people of Hida seem driven to create the ideal form of whatever they touch, whether it's a sliding door or a sirloin. My skewer was just a tiny, fleeting, and expensive taste of that devotion. Craftsman's Crossing, from charred cedar to cash machines. My son's quest for Hida beef, a crusade that began with a few skewers, was not yet over. It seemed the spirit of Yasufuku, the bovine patriarch of Gifu Prefecture, had possessed him completely. We crossed a bridge over the Miyagawa River, leaving the modern world for one built of dark, oiled wood. We walked into the old town, a district so perfectly preserved it felt like a movie set that forgot to get taken down. We walked past buildings of charred timber, a clever medieval solution for insect proofing that also happens to look incredibly cool. We walked past sake breweries, each marked by a giant ball of cedar branches hanging like a piece of primitive IKEA art. My son pointed, "Beef nigiri." It was a command, not a request. A man behind a stall produced a delicate slice of marbled beef, laid it over rice, and blasted it with a blowtorch. The fat hissed and sizzled, perfuming the air. My son ate it in a single, reverent bite. It was, he confirmed with a solemn nod, really yummy. The same genius that blowtorched a bit of cow knew how to build a town. This place, the Sanmachi Suji, is a museum you can walk through. The merchant houses from the Edo period still stand, their latticed wooden fronts a subtle flecks of 17th century wealth. The more intricate the woodwork, the bigger the bank account. This architectural precision comes from the Hida no Takumi, the master craftsman of the region. For centuries, this mountainous province had no rice to offer the emperor, so they paid their taxes in people. They sent their best carpenters to the capital to build temples, which has to be the most creative tax dodge in history. It also explains why the local people are still known for being sturdy and practical. Generations of avoiding the taxman by being good with their hands will do that to you. The cedar balls hanging outside the breweries, we learned, are called sugidama. They start out green when the sake is new, then slowly turn brown as it ages, like a botanical mood ring for booze. You can just duck inside for a tasting, following the unspoken invitation of slowly decaying foliage. But what happens when these ancient traditions, these centuries of refined craft, collide with the idiotic demands of modern life? Our evening answered that question by becoming a sprawling, pointless convenience store saga. We needed cash. We found a family mart, a beacon of fluorescent hope. We bought some novelty snacks, but the ATM rejected our foreign cards with silent, electronic scorn. Fine. We walked to a 7-Eleven. Success. We got our yen and, as a reward, bought more, different novelty snacks. On the way back, we stopped at the bus station to book our trip for the next day, at which point we realized we had nothing for breakfast, so we went into another family mart. That's 3 convenience store stops in under an hour. We had unintentionally embarked on a sacred pilgrimage of Japanese retail and failed at the final hurdle. We missed out on a Lawson. 2 family marts and a 7-Eleven. The trifecta remained incomplete. We had to do better. A TM spits out cash. 3 stores, 1 foolish quest. Breakfast is secured. That brings us to the close of Chapter 18, where wrong trains find their terminus. A journey demonstrating how Takayama's preserved history is woven directly into the routines of daily life, from an ancient spiritual passage to a modern convenience store run. Join us next time, when a trip to see iconic farmhouses in Shirakawa-go prompts a surprising inquiry into Japan's new religious movements and their profound political influence. If you enjoyed this journey, the complete travelogue is available right now as a Kindle book on Amazon, Shinkansen and Sensibility. And if you want to come behind the scenes and get bonus content, you can join my community on Patreon. Thanks for listening to The Rise the Limit.